We're here to talk about safety in the laboratory. And before we actually even go in the laboratory, we need to talk about what you need to do when you first arrive. First of all, before you go in the laboratory, you should identify the nearest exit you have for leaving the building should something occur that requires that. And so we have one over here, and we also have one down the hall. You should also know where the nearest fire extinguisher is. And the fire extinguisher here is in the cabinet along the wall. And the reason that the fire extinguisher isn't in the lab is we want you to be able to get out of the lab, away from the fire, and still be able to access the fire extinguisher. It shouldn't be that you have to go through the fire to get to the fire extinguisher, which is why it's here. Your job is not to use the fire extinguisher. Your job is to get out of the building. Your instructor will be using the fire extinguisher, but it's important that everybody knows where it is. Should something happen that requires leaving the building, you should move swiftly towards the exits. Don't run, but go quickly. Once you're outside, stay together so your instructor can take attendance so we know who's outside the building, and move about 50 feet away from the building. If we're going to be outside for a long time, particularly on a day like today when it's snowing, what we'll do is we'll do evacuation to the Chase Gymnasium, which is the gym building about 100 yards north of our lab building. When you come in the lab, the first thing you should do is hang up your coat and your backpack. Does this look safe to you? The answer is no. People can trip over that, and we need to avoid any kind of opportunity for people to get hurt. Cubbies for coats and backpacks are found in the front of the room. So little cubby holes for these and the places to hang up your coat. And so put your coat and your backpack here instead of on the floor where someone could trip on it. Thank you. Safety in lab is actually pretty simple conceptually. What we want to do is we want to keep hazardous chemicals from getting on your skin or getting inside you. And we also want to keep them from getting into the environment. So it's pretty easy to think about safety in those terms. So the first thing we need to do is worry about what we wear. If we're going to be using hazardous chemicals, we want to wear a lab jacket. So when you come in the lab, put on a lab coat. The most important thing to keep chemicals off you is those things that keep chemicals out of your eyes. Your eyes are the most sensitive and dangerous place of attack for hazardous chemicals. And for that we have safety goggles. And so these safety goggles are not the same thing as like safety glasses you would get at like a Home Depot or a Lowe's that keep a nail from hitting your eyes. These are fully sealing. And so what happens is, if I wear a pair of safety glasses like this and I put these on, what happens is there's a gap right here. So if something splashes on my forehead, it's going to drip right down to my eyes. And that is bad. So what we have instead is we have these fully sealing goggles, and you put those on, and those you'll feel seal all across your skin above and below your eyes. So these are the kind of goggles you need to be wearing, and those are the most important piece of safety attire that you'll have in lab. And you should put those on right around when you come into lab. Ooh, my hair's messy. When you go to your lab bench, the first thing you need to do is to assume that there's stuff on your lab bench that's bad for you. And so I just came in this room now to do this filming, and I just want to show you something. So right here on this bench, right here on this bench is this spot. Look at that. If I move the camera around a bit, it's like it's shiny. There's a shiny spot on the bench. So you can see the light shining off it. So it's kind of like, it looks like it's wet, but it's actually kind of not wet. So the first thing you do when you come in the lab is clean your lab bench. So just because there are people in here who wash them at the end of their lab doesn't mean you shouldn't assume that they did a bad job. You should assume they did and clean up your lab bench. Unless you're working with just water, before you start, you should read and analyze safety data sheets, which are documents that talk about hazards and proper handling of chemicals. And so these will be available in lab, or you can also find them online. And so look at those before you start your lab. In addition to wearing goggles as well as a lab jacket, sometimes you'll want to be using gloves to cover up your hands, depending on what you're working with. And so in the labs, there'll be a wall rack that has boxes of gloves of different sizes for you. And so if you feel like you want to wear them, just kind of wear them. They're there for your use. And in particular, if your instructor tells you you should wear them because we're going to be using something particularly toxic or hazardous, then go ahead and make sure you wear them. If you're going to be heading out to the restroom or when you're done leaving lab, don't go out with your gloves on because your gloves might have contaminated things on them. So take your gloves off and throw them out when you leave. You can put new ones on when you come back in.